It's always so nice to be able to get up before the sun, get up before everybody starts their day to get your brewing setup ready. It's just you, the raw ingredients, and your equipment, and a quest to brew the best beer you possibly can that day. And this is exactly what I think is perfect about brewing as a whole, and especially in times that we are in now of 2020, August, July area. We are in the midst of a pandemic. It's nice to be able to take your mind off things and just focus in on one thing in particular. Here I am getting all of my instruments calibrated, getting my minerals and lactic acid ready for the mash. I adjust the whole volume of water with the acid and the minerals before mashing in. And as I start to collect more RO water, once I've transferred all of my strike water to my mash tun, I start heating that up in the meantime until the mash temperature of the strike water is ready for me to mash in. I'm targeting a mash temperature of about 154 in this particular recipe. This was intended to be a double hazy New England IPA, or Hazy IPA, however you want to call it. And there was quite a bit that didn't happen. It kind of went astray in this brew day. Particularly my fuse on the temperature controller I used to operate my rims tube blew out a few weeks ago and took about 3 weeks to receive a replacement. So I was unable to use that in this brew day. And the second thing that happened was I adjusted my grain mill, and I think I overshot it or used the wrong feeler gauge for the gap setting, and it just wasn't the crush I was looking for looking back on it. And after I was graining out, I saw quite a bit of grains that were uncrushed and basically did not get to extract any of the sugar out of some of the grains. So I really just got a terrible mash efficiency on this brew day. Normally I get in the range of about 80-ish% depending, and in this particular brew I only got 60%. So there goes my chance at a double. This ended up being a single Hazy IPA, which we'll break into later. This particular batch was about 44 pounds of grain, 45 if you include the pound of rice hulls I used due to the heavy adjuncts of flaked oats and white wheat. This was a blend of 2-row, Golden Promise, flaked oats, and white wheat. There was, I think, about 7 hops in total into this brew, 4 on the hot side, those being Citra in the boil, and for Whirlpool was Amarillo, Citra again, Galaxy, and Idaho7. First time using Idaho7, and then for the dry hop, I was shooting for a hopping rate of about 7 pounds per barrel in the dry hop. And to put that into perspective, this is a 13-gallon batch due to, I know there was going to be a lot of loss during the brew because of the dry hop amount. So I wanted to overshoot and hope to come out with 2 5-gallon kegs worth of beer. But there was 2 pounds in total in the dry hop alone, and I want to say close to a pound inside of the kettle. So around that 3-ish pounds per barrel on the hot side to kind of help combat the expected roughly 8% ABV that this was supposed to come out to, and it did not end up being that case. I really enjoy being able to brew at the house and use the spent grains on the chickens we have in our backyard. We only have 3 hens, though the neighbors have some, and I was able to bring them roughly a full 5-gallon bucket's worth as well. And it's really cool to just see the raw ingredients we use in brewing kind of go for full circle. When I'm collected all my wort into my boil kettle, I really like to get a step up on cleaning. So I try to clean out my mash tun and pretty much have everything clean by the time knockout or chilling comes about. So here I am collecting a sample of pre-boil wort, using an ice bath to cool it down to the proper temperature so I can take that reading accurately, and throwing in my first addition of hops. I've done multiple ways of hopping on the hot side hazy IPAs. I've done no boil hops, I've done whirlpool only hops, I've done late hopping and whirlpool only. I really tend to enjoy those hazy IPAs brewed with bittering. It gets to be cloying when you don't have any bitterness to counteract the full body and sweetness of the beer in the final product, in my particular opinion. Now, on a homebrew level, adding bittering hops is pretty much required in my eyes. On a commercial scale, the chilling, depending on your setup, takes so long that the whirlpool adds enough bitterness to combat and kind of balance out the beer after it's all said and done. What I like to do on the last 15 minutes or so is to run in line my counterflow chiller to make sure everything is sanitized before turning off the flame. And at flame out, I then turn the water on and recirculate the entire volume in the kettle to create the whirlpool, while also chilling it slightly to my target temperature, in this case 180 degrees Fahrenheit, to then add my whirlpool hops. Once I whirlpool for the set amount of time, in this case being 20 minutes, I always let it settle for at least 10 minutes, if not 15 if I can, because it really helps let all the particulate settle out into the bottom and gather in that nicely packed cone. After that, I get everything set up to transfer into the fermenter, and in this case I'm going to use my unit tank, so I put a sight glass in line just to help see where I need to cut the runnings into the fermenter, because there's a lot of volume from the kettle through the hoses, through the pump, and the chiller until it finally gets to the fermenter. So I might start seeing true pickup at the kettle, but I got quite a bit of ways to go before it hits the fermenter. Now in this particular brew, I'm using Wyeast 1318, which is their London Ale 3. It is hands down my favorite yeast strain when it comes to brewing hazy IPAs for a multitude of reasons. One, it tends to finish no lower than around 1012 to 1014, especially on the first generation. And it has enough fruity esters to it that make it delightful and enjoyable, but not overpowering like some strains. Commercially, I used Imperial Yeast 38 or A38, which is their juice strain, which I particularly enjoy, though I feel like it can be very overbearing if not fermented on the colder side. I usually start off most of these English strains on that 66-ish Fahrenheit for a few days, and then kind of gradually bump it up until probably about a week in, and give it that diacetyl rest that it truly needs. This batch took quite a bit of time to ferment. I think I didn't even dry hop it until 10 days in, after it had hit and stayed at a terminal gravity of 1014. And then after it had been there for 3 days, I then soft crashed it to 60 degrees, just enough to get the yeast to fall out of suspension so that I could then harvest and reuse later on. And also dry hopping at a lower temperature really helps in not extracting too much of those harsh and almost woody characteristics you can get in the dry hop, particularly when you're dry hopping as heavy as I am here. Like I said, I like to harvest the yeast when possible, so that's why I choose not to ferment or dry hop during primary fermentation. I also enjoy the flavor profile that's repeatable, and when that yeast strain is on its last pitch, I then usually will dry hop during active fermentation for those biotransformation properties that gives. Though I haven't found quite a substantial difference enough to justify using a new pitch of yeast every time. These unit tanks are quite handy. They have a lot of nice features and truly make you feel like you're at a professional brewery. It has everything that a professional brewery unit tank would, minus the fact that it has coils inside of the vessel rather than a jacketed glycol system around the tank. Some homebrew scale models do have that, but they're substantially more expensive than those without. The downfall of having the cooling coil inside of the vessel is it tends to kind of bind with the dry hops and kind of just not allow the dry hops to fully settle out into the cone as they normally would, at least not in this particular brew. I think for future beers that I dry hop, and especially ones that I dry hop heavy, I'll be rousing with CO2 from the bottom of the cone to kind of bubble CO2 through the chilling coils inside of the fermenter to hopefully not only break up anything that's kind of clung to the coil itself, but also to keep the hops in solution. It's been a technique I've used at a professional scale. I used one at the house as well, and it tends to extract fairly fast at the cost of some harshness that would then settle out after some prolonged time in the keg. The dry hop was broken up into 2 single-pound additions for 3 days apiece, and then once that was complete, I then cold crashed it on the 3rd day of the second dry hop down to about 40 degrees, because that's where this likes to chill to. It doesn't really go any further in the middle of summer in my 100-degree garage. Then drop out what's remaining inside of the cone to try as much hop particulate and any yeast that has settled out of there to hopefully maximize my yield. And as you can see here, this particular one was a doozy. It was quite messy. If you've seen my kegging process on an earlier video, that will go into a lot more detail, especially on how to transfer carbonated beer, which I have here inside of the fermenter, and how I like to basically keep a oxygen-free environment in my kegs at the same time. I think on a homebrew scale where you have the ability to push out all of the sanitizer in the kegs that was completely filled to begin with CO2, you then leave a completely oxygen-free environment to then transfer your beer in. And especially when you transfer out of the last keg or the keg that you have sanitized with the transfer hose, not only is the keg ready to rock and purged, the transfer hose itself is sanitized and purged as well. The inline bouncer that I'm using in this video came in handy, and I've used it plenty of times in the past, but in this particular brew with so much dry hop in the beer, it really shined. Yeah. It probably gave me, I don't know, a few more pints in the keg than I would have without it, because it really just caught so much. And you can see here in a little bit where the entire inside of the filter was completely packed full of debris. This was a very unfortunate yield. I was just unable to drop all the hop matter out of the conical, resulting in only 7.5 gallons when I was really hoping for 10. And when you talk about not having it be a double to begin with and hitting it so hard with the dry hop, I was really hoping to get the entire volume, and I just wasn't.
So here we are 1 month later to the day that this beer was brewed. What an interesting batch this has come to be. Initially planning to brew a double hazy or New England style IPA, and with some major efficiency lost in the mash between the mill and the lack of using my rims tube, which I talked about in a previous episode on why that would help increase your mash efficiency. This beer is called Confidence Overdose. It is 6.6%, initially planning to be 8. This beer is 6.6% in ABV. Starting gravity was 1064. Finishing gravity was 1014. The color, in my opinion, turned out flawless. I have a pretty standard Hazy IPA grain bill normally, though in this batch I used Golden Promise, so let's kind of break down what was used. As far as malt goes, I used 2-row Golden Promise, white wheat, and oats, flaked oats. That's my usual go-to minus the Golden Promise. The hops used in the hot side in the kettle were Citra, Idaho7, Galaxy, and Amarillo. The yeast used for this beer was Wyeast 1318, which is my favorite strain for producing hazy IPAs, and that's London Ale 3. For the dry hopping, again, this was dry hopped at a rate of 7 pounds per barrel. To kind of put that into perspective, I used 2 pounds of total dry hop in this theoretical 10-gallon batch. And the dry hop was Galaxy, HBC586, and HBC692, which are experimental varieties. On paper, an IBU of 65. And without further ado, let's kind of break into this beer. The head retention is still there. I've poured it about 5 minutes ago. Like I said, it's got a beautiful golden hue, almost straw yellow. Looks like straight orange juice. Off the nose, I get a lot of ripe mango, like overly ripe mango. I get initially when this beer was poured, I got a lot of this candied orange aroma, which I don't really get anymore. I get a lot of, I get some stone fruit and I get peach in particular, but not like the meat flesh of the peach. I get the peach skin, where it's almost a little tart and subtle, but you get a lot of that peach quality to it. I get a lot of mango. Mango seems to be a quality that I pick up quite a bit with Galaxy. I also get this woodiness, not in an unpleasant way. I think it kind of balances out that very sweet mango tropical fruit characteristic of this beer, and not in a spicy way either. It's I think it's what I would imagine if I were to bite maybe the husk of a coconut, not necessarily a tree, so woody might not be the best descriptor for it. Maybe husk, I'm not too sure. And again, I get the peach in the flavor. It's more of the meaty part of the peach that I get. It's really quite pleasant. As far as mouthfeel goes, this thing has nailed it on the creaminess. Initially, that first few days off the keg, it was very creamy, like almost what I would describe as like if you've ever had almond or oat milk. Very silky on the palate, and it left a very chalky, drying mouthfeel that has since faded away after about a week and a half in the keg. It's a mango bomb to me. I had my wife taste sensory to this. She lends more to the herbal which I don't really pick up in this. More woody in the aroma and in the flavor, and she picked up on the peach more than I do. For whatever reason, like I said, I get a lot of that tropical fruit. What I can pick out in particular is the mango. I think it's overall a very pleasant beer. I will make sure to put the recipe in the description below. And I appreciate you guys watching, those who have went from start to finish on this grain to glass video. If you would like to see more of these grain to glass style videos, please make sure to let me know down in the comments. If you found any sort of enjoyment or entertainment from this video, please make sure to give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll catch you on the next video. Cheers.